Good morning and welcome to the 2009 Pro Bono Institute Annual Seminar. I'm Esther Lardent and I have the privilege of heading the Pro Bono Institute, and as such, every year I have the opportunity, although it's not exactly a calm time, to step back and think about what the state of Pro Bono is in this country and increasingly around the world. And so I want to give you my somewhat idiosyncratic, perhaps, view of where things stand. We meet, obviously, at a very important and difficult time. And this is the story from where we at the Pro Bono Institute sit. The story is good news and bad news. The economy is the story that dominates our lives and the news right now, but it is not the defining story of our time, and it is not the defining story of what all of us do. So I'm going to start with the bad news, and for many of you, this will be all too familiar, but let me just review some figures. Last year, in talking about this, I talked about, and I will start with because it is the most important and most devastating part of the bad news picture, what is happening to low-income and disadvantaged and disenfranchised people in this country. Last year I talked about 2 million households facing foreclosure, just a seemingly unthinkable figure. 46 million people in poverty. It's a horrifying picture. This year, 1 year later, the latest predictions on foreclosure is that 7 million households are facing foreclosure this year. And the lagged count on low-income people in poverty is 51 million, and it is rising at an extraordinary rate. 18 million of those 51 million people are children. And we are all too close to the situation that President Roosevelt described in the 30s of 1/3 of the nation ill-clothed, ill-housed, and ill-fed. And the economic downturn, of course, has not just impacted the U.S., it has impacted the entire world. So that among the poorest of nations, where people on average earn less than $1 a day, income is dropping precipitously. We are seeing food riots, and we are seeing the economic crisis and other war and destabilization threaten the recent extraordinary progress that's been made in equal rights, in employment, in economic development, and the rule of law. Public interest and legal services groups. I have been working in the public interest for longer than I care to admit. And about every 5 years I say, this is the worst I've ever seen it. I said it in '82, I said it in '96, but this year is the worst year that I think that has ever happened in the public interest community. It is the perfect storm of awfulness. More clients in need, a range of issues that many people haven't even dealt with before, increasing complexity and flux of those issues, and at the same time, a financial crisis that is extraordinary. Years ago, people who advise public interest groups and legal services programs said, diversify your funding. And despite the fact that the people in those groups didn't go to their jobs to fundraise, they went to help the disadvantaged, they went out and did that, so that they no longer relied, for those of them who were getting legal services money, simply on legal services money. They went and developed IOTA programs with the help of the bar. They began private funding campaigns. They reached out to foundations. And in every one of those areas, except legal services funding, which may show a slight, utterly inadequate increase, funding has decreased precipitously. I cannot tell you how dire that situation is. It was bad last year. It is just unbelievable this year. And the pressure of not only closing offices and losing staff, but of saying no to utterly desperate people over and over again, I sometimes think is more than my friends and colleagues in public interest can bear. Last year, the picture for law firms and legal departments and corporations, of course, was a very different picture. How much has changed in a year? How dramatic, extraordinary, and troubling is the change? What a difference a year makes in the fortune of major law firms and corporations. Reductions in force at a level never seen before, profound contractions in the economy and in the work, highly respected firms and companies dissolved or in bankruptcy. And I think most destabilizing and disturbing is the fact that we don't know where the bottom of this is. We don't know where this is going to end. And it is an economic crisis that none of us have seen in our lifetime. I'm looking at it, I don't think anybody was around in the 30s. None of us have seen it in our lifetime. And it seems to be a crisis of a very different dimension and type, so that we aren't able to say when this is going to bounce back and what that bounce back will look like. And as lawyers, I think one of the things we hate the most is uncertainty. You know, we're taught to think from precedent and to extrapolate from precedent, but we don't seem to have precedent here, and nobody seems to have a very effective crystal ball to tell us what's going to happen. So this is it's a frightening, terrible situation for all of us, with different impacts, obviously, depending on where we work. And then for the people who are not in this room, the people that we seek to help, it is a disaster. It is a disaster. So what's the good news? The good news is all of you. The good news is all of you. We hear people ask about whether, given the extent, the dimension, the severity of what's going on economically, whether or not pro bono is still relevant, still important, still valued. And the answer is, truly, that pro bono is more important, more valued, more critical, and needs to do more. It's a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true, that times of crisis can and often are times of innovation and opportunity, and times of cultural and moral renewal. If we look at business and legal activity, if we look at unemployment statistics, if we look at the stock market, if we have the courage, which I certainly don't, to look at our pathetic little investments and what's happened to them lately, things are dark. But if we look at the capacities of and the opportunities available to the people in this room and the hundreds and thousands of lawyers and legal staff that you represent, the outlook is bright. So let's look first at pro bono at law firms. This has been a time of unparalleled performance and integration of pro bono at law firms. Pro bono performance and hours are totally robust. We are obviously just getting the figures in terms of 2008, but in 2007, the hours reported by our challenged signatory pro bono firms literally tripled the hours that they reported in 1995, and up approximately 20% from the hours in 2007. We know from our initial discussions that 2008, which we're just getting the data in on, will be an incredibly positive year for pro bono. And anecdotally, and based on what people in this room do, we think 2009 could be the ultimate record breaker. Some people say, and I think it's overly simplistic, it's true in part but overly simplistic, that increase is due to the fact that there is excess capacity in firms. There is, at many firms, in some departments, excess capacity, and firms are being smart about taking advantage of that excess capacity to to allow people to do pro bono work that lets them grow in their professional development, lets them be useful, gain new skills, and improve their morale. But in point of fact, I think that is a very small factor in the increase. I think what has happened is that the hard work undertaken by people in this room to institutionalize pro bono, to transform pro bono culture, to embed pro bono, has borne fruit. Pro bono really is a fundamental part of the everyday culture of these firms and of the work of their lawyers and legal staffs. And so I think that more than anything else is what's driving